The battle axe is by far the most popular weapon in Albion's online open world. Everybody's using it, it feels powerful, and its win rate is only about 40%? That's terrible! Does this weapon actually secretly suck? Well, it does, if you're not using it correctly. In this video, I will show you why you're playing the battle axe wrong and what the proper play should look like. The skills you should be using, the builds that work, and stick around, because I'll also show you another weapon in the axe tree that might secretly be better for solo content, and yet people are still sleeping on it. Let's dive in. The battle axe shines in open world PvE VP content. Even on low tiers it has an incredible clearing speed and lets you just speedrun through all camps and bosses and any kind of PvE. In PvP it's one of the best brawlers in the game. If you and your opponent were to just stand in place and trade hits, the battle axe would win most of the time. Unfortunately, most players aren't going to just stand in place and let you chop them to pieces, which is where the weakness of the battle axe lies. Make no mistake, the battle axe doesn't have the worst mobility in the game, but it doesn't have the best one either. So you need to itemize to compensate, for example with Deathgivers helmets, and still people are going to kite you around and walk away and reset the fight if it doesn't go in their favor. The general strategy of the battle axe sounds extremely simple and consists of a one single step. Go ooga booga. Because of how simple that sounds, this weapon is often recommended to new players, which I consider to be a noob trap, because if you actually try it, you will soon realize that although the plan is simple, it's actually not that easy to execute, and that's because people are not going to let you just unga bunga. They will space you, they will pop defensives, put you under cultist cowl, and thus to be actually effective with this weapon, you need to have some experience, you need to track the cooldowns and, hear me out, you actually sometimes need to walk away from your opponents, which is very counterintuitive for a battle axe, because a battle axe wants to unga bunga, but you need to unga bunga smart. There's no reason to follow your opponent if you can't actually get on top of them, especially not if they can just poke you from a distance. In those cases, it's much smarter to kite back, wait for your mobility skills to come back from cooldown, and then try again. When doing PvP, your skill selection looks like this. Notice that you only have one Q and you unlock this at the level 85 of access. Until you unlock this, I recommend you to stay away from PvP and just fame farm, which is very easy with the battle axe. Battle axe is great at PvE. Notice how I'm using the Q. It's always the first 2 Qs and not using the third one. So just QQ, wait. Just 2 Qs and wait. This is because using 3 Qs in a row puts the spell on the longest cooldown possible. So if you just use 2 Qs, you will dish out the most damage per second. That doesn't mean you don't use the third Q at all. The third Q roots the target in place, so the extra cooldown is a good deal when you need to root your opponent, when they are running away, when you are about to finish them. Do note that the third Q doesn't apply a bleed stack. As for your W, you basically have 2 options. You use the dash against hypermobile targets, against Kytras, bows, froststaffs, and you use adrenaline boost against brawlers and people who cannot run away from you that easily. On an occasion, you might find yourself facing a Trinity Spear on the third W, and on those special occasions you might want to consider the first W, the Deadly Chop. Your E can be cast twice, and it scales with the amount of bleed stacks on your opponents, so in an ideal situation you want to cast this when they are on 3 stacks. The first cast of your E does big damage, while the second cast does little damage but heals you. If you don't cast it the second time, the cooldown is much shorter, so similar to your Q, you don't always want to cast your E twice. Sometimes you only want to dish out the damage, so you only cast it once and wait. You can see me demonstrate it in this fight, where I have an HP lead basically the entire time and I don't need the heal. So I only use the first E and never in this fight use the second one. By the way, thank you so much for watching. If you're finding any value in this, please consider subscribing and hyping the video. It's the best way to help me grow the channel. And finally, your passive. This is a part of the reason for why is the battle axe such a good brawler. The math behind how this works is boring, but all you need to know is that from time to time you're gonna get a bit tankier, and it works better if you are on cloth armor. You don't need to play around this in fights, and don't think about it either. In theory, swapping to the lifesteal passive would make more sense against kiters, since you are rarely going to get 5 hits on them, they are going to just run away. But I always forget to swap this. If you remember, yeah, try it. Let me demonstrate the skill usage on a fight against another battle axe in here, and then we'll talk about the builds. I see they are on mage ropes, so I swap my W to the dash, even though against brawlers you want adrenaline rush, but if I go to dash they will have nothing to purge. This battle axe lets me dismount them, which is their first mistake, because I'm already applying bleed stacks on them. I immediately purge their Ws with my mage rope and reduce the damage they do with my hood. That's why my health bar barely even moves when they hit me with their E. Notice that I'm always using just QQs in here. QQ, while they are using all 3. That's why my DPS is much higher than theirs. They use their ropes, but there's nothing to purge from me, and I reflexively kite back, which is a mistake on this otherwise clean kill, but now I give them a chance to escape, so when catching them, notice that now I finally use the third Q to root them. The build that I run for Mists looks like this. The build looks very similar for Corrupted Dungeons, except now you don't use Duskweaver helmet, but Mercenary hood. For the open world it's a very similar build, except now you get to use Mercenary jacket. And yeah, this you can also swap for Torch. You don't need Sarcophagus now, because the jacket will make you chunky enough. But if you want more damage, the Torch again is a thing you can consider. With the food, you don't fight on pork pies, of course, you bring more food in your inventory. So for open world I have a swap, don't need this technically. Of course you don't need tools either, and just one food is okay. For all builds, keep your passives on the balanced mind. If you are on ropes, then you will keep your passive on the aggression, the first one. Notice the spell I have on my shoes, the Swift Cut, which works excellent in Corrupted Dungeons. It allows you to close the distance immediately, which allows me to go Ooga Booga immediately. Trinity Spear isn't going anywhere, so I use my hood just to deny some of their damage. Mage Robe allows me to purge their stacks. They even hit me in their Hunter hood, which is very nice. I only stop with the Ooga Booga when they are on Reflect, but as soon as they stop spinning their lead stick, I go back to bashing them over the head. And you can see me just sticking on top of them and not leaving them any distance. Didn't even have to use my potion here. I mentioned that the Battle Axe is one of the best brawlers in the game, but I'm not sure if it's the best brawler. That's because this place is contested by daggers on the Thunder Armor Q. That's why I resist my urge to Ooga Booga here and kite away instead. I certainly don't want to fight them when they are on Geekbot. Similarly, I don't want to fight them when they pop their Mercenary jacket. And only now, at this point, I know they've used all of their spells, so maybe now it's a good time to Ooga Booga. It just barely wasn't enough, but it could have been. The mistake here happened just after I swooped in. I used my E before I used my W, which was the mistake, because the W could actually increase the damage my E would have done. So I could have made more damage, maybe win this. If there are 2 or more battle axes going Oonga Boonga on the same target, their bleeds won't stack. Rather, each battle axe gets its own bleed stack with its own separate number. The in-game graphic doesn't show this. You will always see the highest number, which might not necessarily be yours, but you will see the separate stacks underneath the target's portrait. In other words, it's not possible for your friend to apply 3 bleed stacks on a target and then you getting instant max value from your blood bandit. You will need to apply your own stacks. As a battle axe, when you finally get to Unga Bunga your opponent, you want to dish out as much damage as possible, which means you want to cast your Qs off cooldown. Quick tip to improve this is go to game settings, controls, and change your spellcasting to quick cast on button press. This will remove the spell indicator. So now it might be a little bit more difficult to aim, at least until you get used to it. But it will make your casting a little bit faster, and I strongly recommend you get used to this. Maybe you're still asking, okay, why does the battle axe have such a low win rate? And I think this number is skewed by the fact that this weapon is often used by new players and by PvE players. So when these players get ganked in the open world, they don't necessarily know how to fight back or defend themselves. So the numbers go down, but otherwise I think the weapon is fine. What I think was a big nerf to the battle axe is the last patch, where they decreased the projectile speed of your E. Before there were, I say in this build the battle axe wants to go Unga Bunga, and before there were actually like these kitey builds where you could dance around your opponent and just hit them with your E from a distance. But these builds are now much more difficult to execute because the projectile is so slow that your opponents can dodge it easily. So I actually only recommend to use the Blood Bandit from a close distance. Ideally, if you set it up with your trap Q first, so if you root your target, they cannot dodge, you hit them with your E. And that got me thinking, actually if the E is now a melee range only, maybe instead of using the battle axe, you could use the Infernal Sight, which is similar, like it has an E that does big damage, but it has no range. But the damage is significantly higher, and it is kind of like a bloodletter. You can execute your targets in their undead capes pretty nicely. It's not perfect, of course. The E is very telegraphed and your opponents get to pop defensives if they still have them, which they might not, because the Infernal Sight only has 20 seconds cooldown. You can spam it basically anytime you see it, although a lot of people don't even know what this weapon does, which makes it a little bit stronger. So right now you can abuse this fact a little bit and have great success with this in the open world. Just for a demonstration, here's me doing some solo camps and I see a name tag in the distance, so I hope this player comes and ganks me, ideally from an envy spot, which would give me a great advantage. So I make sure not to do big pulls here, I pretend I didn't see the name tag. Unfortunately they didn't come from envies, but as soon as I see them coming from the west, I leash them up, eat the food, and we start brawling. They counter my Inferno Shield with their envies. Although they come out of it a little bit too early, I still have my shield here, which helps me tank some of the big damage. Then we brawl a bit, I pop my E and I kite. They still have their invisibility potions equipped, while I have 2 healing potions, so actually I'm winning here, even though it doesn't look like it. But they don't seem to realize this, so I'm hoping to bait them a bit and wait for my cooldowns to reset. Finally they realize it and the tables turn, now it's me chasing them. I can slow them with my hood, which denies their shoes a little bit. I use my W for mobility only and I keep chasing. My boots are soon up, so I immediately pop them. I pop my Inferno in anticipation of their E, but they use it for running away only. Doesn't matter, I think I can still catch them. Because I'm on refreshing sprint, my next shoes will also be much sooner, so that's why I have a chance of catching a Carving. Otherwise Carving has way too higher mobility than me and would be able to run away. They try to mount up with their Guardian Shield, but my hood has an interrupt, which works even through it. Finally I can execute them through their Undead Cape, and now I just have to deal with the Rat. I've clipped many fights with the Infernal Sight, so expect a video soon. Thank you for watching all the way till the end. Please also hype the channel here on YouTube, because that will help it grow.